arrived at the end of the platforming section of the Crash Bandicoot Marathon because the next two games we're looking after this are a kart racing spin-off and a party game spin-off. I don't know when I'll get to the other generation of Crash Bandicoot games, but I wanted to keep things simple for now. So without further ado, this is...
Crash Bandicoot WARPED!
I always did find that emphasis on the warped part of the title screen a bit funny, and seeing that both Cortex and the new villain of the game Uka Uka are voiced by Clancy Brown, it just sounds like he passed a major kidney stone right as he screamed WARPED! But I'm not here to gross you guys out for this entire review. The third entry in the series was released in 1998, and by this time Crash Bandicoot was the PlayStation's platformer sensation. There was magazine coverage, a surplus of commercials. Crash Bandicoot was seen as the next big platforming mascot next to Super Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog. Like its predecessor, Crash Bandicoot 3 was also a Christmas gift, alongside my first ever DualShock analog controller. Crash Bandicoot Warped was the first game I ever played with vibration feedback, something I immediately noticed as early as the first underwater level in the game, whenever you mounted on the jet ski.
The idea of a vibrating controller was something I found so cool back then. Nowadays it's pretty standard stuff, but to have the actual controller respond to certain events that were happening on the screen was just something that enriched my video game experience. That, and I found it very therapeutic for those long video gaming sessions.
Crash Bandicoot 3's story assumes you got all the gems in the last game, because the plot begins with Cortex's destroyed space station plummeting toward the Wampa Islands, crashing into this structure releasing a mysterious power known as Uka Uka, the evil twin brother of Aku Aku, who now suddenly has a voice. Uka Uka berates Cortex for not following his plans for world domination, but he's willing to give him another chance for accidentally releasing him from his prison. With the help of N Trophy and his Time Twister machine, the villains begin to hunt for power crystals scattered all across time to help them accomplish their fiendish goals. Aku Aku enlightens Crash and Coco on Uka Uka's plan, fuck this is a mouthful, and teleports them to the Time Twisting machine in hopes of nabbing all the crystals before Cortex and his goons can manage to do so. So it's a journey through time and space. The two Bandicoots are going to be jumping across a ton of different locations, from medieval period to the prehistoric era complete with Triceratops chase sequences, running down the Great Wall of China, raiding some tombs in ancient Egypt, gunning down blimps and biplanes in a World War I setting, jet skiing through times when pirates ruled the seven seas, blazing through freeways on your motorcycle. Honestly, the level variety completely trumps the first two games, which were already pretty gorgeous and organic to begin with. But I believe because of the time traveling plot, Naughty Dog was able to go all out with the detail and design of the game's numerous settings. Nothing much has really changed for Crash when it comes to mobility, though full analog control is now available no matter which version of the game you play. Spinning, sliding, and jumping are still great ways of dishing out pain, and the belly flop has been given less significance, though it's still there if you ever want to use it for whatever reason. The heads-up display now tells you how many boxes the stage holds, so you can get a good idea of what to expect without having to wait until the end of the level to learn about the box total. This change also applies to the bonus rooms, which I'm convinced was implemented solely because of Cold Hard Crash and its bullshit hidden box. When you defeat a boss after clearing the current section of stages in the Time Twister, Crash is rewarded with a power-up that grants him extra abilities. Boss battles weren't something I spent a lot of time in either of the previous videos because I always thought they were sort of underwhelming even in a great game like Crash Bandicoot 2. Here though, I feel that's a different story. Every encounter here is fast-paced and blood-pumping, kicking dull moments completely out of the window. Ironically, the least remarkable boss fight for me is the final battle against Cortex. I don't know, it just doesn't do much for me, though it's much better than the jetpack shit you had to deal with in Crash Bandicoot 2. The power-ups you get from defeating bosses range from great to awesome, except for the super belly flop. I don't think increasing its impact radius fixes anything, and I deeply apologize to any belly flopping enthusiasts out there. Nah, power-ups like the double jump and the death tornado spin are where it's at. With good timing, you can take major shortcuts in platforming sections thanks to the gliding function of the super spin, and the double jump, well, I think that speaks for itself. The Fruit Bazooka was an upgrade I thought was so fucking awesome when I first played the game, and while it's still a great way to eliminate enemies and nitro boxes from a distance, I don't use it that much anymore. You have to stop dead in your tracks to aim and fire the thing, and I'd rather just do my best to avoid the threat altogether, rather than stop and deal with it. The last power-up you get is the Crash Dash, which is only available after beating the final boss. There's not much explanation for this one anyway, it just causes Crash to run faster and make longer jumps. It's great for trying to score the newly introduced Time Relics, but before we get to that, the objective of every level is about the same as before. There's a power crystal in each stage that you need to grab to complete the level, and there's also the returning gems you can get by various methods, very much like Crash Bandicoot 2, only with less backtracking, thank fucking god. You only need to get power crystals to reach Cortex and finish the game, but going for the complete experience once again requires that you go after all the gems. But in order to get every single gem this time around, you also need to get Time Relics. These majestic ankhs are something you can only get once you complete the stage with the crystal. When you re-enter the stage, you can touch this clock to activate Time Trial mode, where it's a race to see how fast you can complete the stage. To make things more interesting, checkpoint boxes are completely removed, so you have to finish the stage in one life, or else start from the very beginning again. You don't lose lives when you die during a time trial, so you're free to retry as many times as you want. And you have these special boxes that can temporarily stop the timer depending on the number on the box. If you can finish the stage under the assigned time, you're guaranteed a Sapphire Relic, but if you go one step beyond, you can win a Gold Relic. The reason you need relics in the first place is because a secret platform that's located at the center of the hub will appear once you get 5 relics, and riding it will take you to a hidden room with 5 bonus stages that unlock with more relics you collect. Some of the stages are hidden areas of previously visited levels, but 3 of them are completely original stages that have their own gems and relics to obtain. You only need to get the Sapphire Relics for the sake of getting the best ending, but the Gold Relics are just nicer to look at in my opinion. And you can even score a secret gem from Coco if you can achieve every single Gold Relic in the game. It even bumps your percentage total from 100% to 105%. We're getting straight Donkey Kong Country up in this son of a bitch. However, if you're still not satisfied with the Gold Relics, you can always go after the fabled Platinum Relics. These are something else entirely. The Gold Relics required extensive knowledge of the stage already, but these, you gotta pretty much master the stage and blaze through it perfectly, knowing where to jump, spin, super spin, slide jump, how to effectively use Aku Aku, crates, cutting corners, all of that.
You guys all know what a bucket list is, right? Well, one of the things I always want to do at some point or another in my life is to get all the Platinum Relics in Crash Bandicoot 3. Which I know doesn't sound like a big deal to a lot, but it's so damn hard. It's definitely not impossible. In fact, I managed to get a Platinum Relic in this stage by complete fucking accident. But my hands get so cramped from replaying the trial numerous times. Thank you, DualShock controller. Your constant shaking keeps my joints one step ahead of a serious case of arthritis.
DualShock vibration is not an actual cure for arthritis, as far as I'm aware. The mere existence of relics themselves and the fact that they're required to get the best ending can split gamers into 2 camps. They're either something that increases replay value by giving you a reason to revisit stages, or they can be a cheap attempt at padding out game time. Crash Bandicoot 3 can be just as short as the other 2 games when you don't give the gems or relics any consideration. And while I agree that going for relics doesn't really add anything new to the table, I don't mind them as a whole because the stages don't last very long to begin with. Whether it's going down the old-fashioned linear hallway or going for a swim in the ocean, I don't fear there's any stage in this game that overstays its welcome. Crash 3 will have you do more things here than the first 2 games combined. There's more than just the usual stuff like the chase sequences and animal riding, but with Coco on Crash's side this time around, there's motorcycle riding, speeding around in jet skis, flying on biplanes, and the occasional scuba diving. The primary focus of the game is still going down 3D hallways with some 2D action occasionally sprinkled in from time to time, but every group of stages has at least one of these new playstyles. Now, having a bunch of playstyles in one game can usually mean bad news. You want some examples? Just look at 3D Sonic games. I couldn't give 2 shits about the amount of playstyles as long as they're consistent and in relation to what the franchise is about. Crash Bandicoot, since the very beginning, was always about traveling in a 3rd-dimensional space and collecting shit, whether it's Wumpa Fruit, boxes, or grandiose jewelry. Even with something like riding a jet ski or swimming underwater or riding an animal, the name of the game is still the same. It also helps that these gimmicks control pretty damn well, and in my personal opinion do not hinder my experience in the slightest. My only exceptions to the rule are the motorcycle levels, because these require you to play almost an entirely different game. You gotta reach the finish line in first place to acquire the crystal and complete the stage. Given my past personal experiences with other racing games, I don't mind these levels to an extent, but they're definitely my least favorite of the game, and I can imagine that gamers who aren't into racing games at all won't find these particularly appealing. You can argue the same with the flying levels, only, shooting down blimps instead of racing to the finish, but I don't find these as intrusive as the racing levels. There's still something completely different in terms of how a level in Crash Bandicoot works, but not as extreme in my opinion. Every game has its share of gimmicks, which is often the deciding factor of whether or not a game sucks, but Crash Bandicoot 3's design is still superb. The refined gameplay that Crash Bandicoot 2 introduced feels every bit as good as it did then, and in conjunction with diverse aesthetics and refreshing new concepts, all mostly thanks to the time-traveling storyline, Crash Bandicoot 3 is a great time from beginning to end. There's nothing in this game that frustrates me on a level like the backtracking problem in Crash Bandicoot 2, or the issue with gem collecting in the original game. It's smooth sailing throughout the entire adventure for me. I didn't have a Nintendo 64 during the mid to late 90s, and I constantly heard from friends in school that I was missing out on classics like Super Mario 64, Kirby 64, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and even the likes of Banjo-Kazooie. But you know what? The original Crash Bandicoot trilogy was all I needed to get my platforming kicks. These games are the personification of what gaming was like for me before the turn of the millennium, and I'll never forget the good times I had. The fact that you can get all 3 games easily nowadays, especially when you have a PS3, just makes them more attractive. For many who grew up with strictly a PlayStation 1, if it wasn't Crash Bandicoot, it was possibly a certain Purple Dragon, which you can play a demo of by entering the Konami code of all things on the title screen of Crash Bandicoot 3. Trust me guys, I know there's a lot of you who want me to spend some time on Spyro the Dragon, but this may come as a shock to you. I never grew up with Spyro, so if I ever decide to review any of the games, it'll be after I play them for the first time myself. In due time, folks, all in due time. But before I end this, I was asked by a bunch of you Crash enthusiasts to bring mention about the differences in the European and Japanese versions of every Crash game on the PS1. But after doing some research, there's not much to talk about in the first place. The only thing worth any merit I can mention is that the European version of Crash 3 is supposedly harder with different behavioral patterns on certain enemies, as well as added enemies in the animal levels. You know, I never quite understood regional difficulty. What's the point? I believe changing a game's challenge should be done via a difficulty select at the beginning of the game, you know, so that players can get the best of both worlds and not have to deal with either a neutered experience or a hardened experience because of some misconceptions by developers. I think it's pretty cool to mention that for a Western developed title, Crash Bandicoot was actually pretty popular in Japan, selling a healthy amount of games and merchandise. In fact, one of the joke characters you can spot after fully completing Crash 3, known as Fake Crash, was designed after a horrendously inaccurate plushie that was sold in Japanese markets. I think it's great to see that the developers of Naughty Dog had a good sense of humor.
Crash Bandicoot 3 is one of the best-selling games in the PlayStation 1, but Naughty Dog felt the need to move on to other projects regardless of such. But before they left completely, they made one more game for the system. So the next time we meet, we're looking at Crash Team Racing, and the very first game that was made without any of Naughty Dog's involvement, Crash Bash. I don't know how long it'll take me to get this video out there, but I promise I won't have you waiting too long. Hopefully. But thank you guys for watching. You guys have a great night, and take care.